Well, today everybody, in this video, I walk you through how I mix my music. Let's get into it. So what is going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. My name is Ray. I'm a guitar player here on YouTube, and I'm so excited to knock out this video because I haven't done one of these videos in a long time. A really educational kind of walkthrough of how I go through my process of creating, sounds and noises and the things that are in my head, all the above, right? So today's gonna be a lot of fun. And as of late, I've been mixing using Slate Digital's plugins and products. Yes, that's right, everybody. This video is in fact sponsored by Slate Digital, and what an honor, man. If you told me when I first started out that Slate Digital would be interested in working with me, I'd be like looking over my shoulder, like, you talking to me? But in all seriousness, man, yeah, like Slate Digital and I go way back from the very infancy of my YouTube days, of my music days, of my creation days. And today I'm very excited to showcase and share with you all some of their products, some of their plugins, and how I use them for myself, okay? So using Slate Digital plugins, I'm able to create a mix that sounds something like this. One thing I want to talk to you guys about Slate Digital is, in fact, the All Access Pass. The All Access Pass is set up with a subscription service where you can pay by the month, you can pay monthly, or you can pay a one-time annual fee. Basically 3 different ways to get all access. You got amp sims, you got de-essers, you got reverbs, you got synths, you got analog modules, which are so rad. You got so much stuff, man. So basically, yeah, like the All Access Pass, it's rad, and I use it literally every day. So what I want to do is I want to walk you through that very demo song that I just showed you guys, just gave you. I want to walk you guys through it in Logic, in my DAW, and how I mix it, okay? All right, as you can see, we have my Logic project in front of you, and let's just walk through everything that you heard in the demo song. All the presets and all the plugins that I use are either stock from Logic or with Slate Digital, okay? Let's just start with the guitars real quick, as I am a guitar player. Let's just isolate the guitars real quick. So gnarly, such a gnarly sound. And honestly, what I'm using is the THU Slate plugin suite here. And honestly, I'm pretty brand new to this plugin, and I'm kind of kicking myself because this sounds awesome. We have what appears to be a Randall Thrasher, if I'm not mistaken, and then, like a US modern type of cab. We have a whole bunch of different cabs and amps and a whole bunch of cool stuff that you can use. I came up with this preset, basically just like a Randall Thrasher, something like that. Sounds gnarly, dude. Boosting it with a tube screamer of sorts, and that's what I came up with there, okay? If you notice, other than the amp sim, there are no additional plugins, okay? Now, what's awesome about Logic is you have the ability to use the feature called Track Stack, and basically that's just like the summoning of tracks, aka a bus, right? So rather than doing like the traditional thing where you send it to a bus, basically you select your tracks and you right-click them and you create a track stack, and that's essentially the same thing as creating a bus. So on my actual guitar bus, I only have 2 plugins. I have the Infinity EQ from Slate, which is kind of modeling and tweaking one of the presets, which is Metal Guitar Beefy Crunch. And all I did was I just cut out a decent amount of low end and high end. A big boost here at, what is this, like around like 8K? Yeah, a 6K, okay. So kind of giving that upper kind of high end cut that a guitar needs, especially with like double drop C sharp, which is what this riff is in. Like you need some frequencies to stand out, and like 6K as well as a little boost in 1.5K. Those are like just making it pop a little bit more. I got a pretty cliche cut in the low ends, given that scoop sound, because, scoop sounds are pretty rad for metal guitar tones. Kind of cliche, no mids, gain on 10, right? But, I like a little bit of a dip in the mids. It gives it that kind of, like that vibe, that old school vibe that, we as kids first fell in love with when we were dialing our own guitar tones, right? So let me A-B this real quick just so you can hear it. Here it just has so much more like gnarly clank and clarity is in there. Like it's kind of muddy without it, but then when you boost those high mids and kind of just highs, it really just makes it stand out. Sounds so gnarly, dude. I love it, man. One thing I'm really focused on the entire mix in general, but I'll just say here for the guitar tone, no low end. I cut out the low end at 84.9 hertz specifically. Yeah, just like you don't need a lot of low end, a lot of build up, although it sounds cool in a room and like, when you're chugging, like low end sounds rad, right? Like in a mix, you don't want any low end, generally speaking. Some is, acceptable, but you kind of want to keep it in the mid range, which is what, as you can see based on this graph, I've kind of done, right? My guitar's sitting in the mid range. Next plugin is a stock multi-band compressor from Logic. And basically, this is set up here. I'll just orientate you to this plugin. It's 4 bands, and this one, and this one are all bypassed. The only one that's affected is band number 2, and I have it to a frequency range of 96 hertz to 270 hertz, basically just to clamp down on the low chugs, the low palm mutes. A lot of frequencies and a lot of just gain builds up in this register when you're palm muting. So to combat that, you just compress a little bit, ever so slightly, just this frequency range. Pretty cool technique, pretty common technique, but when I found this out a couple years ago, like it was pretty fascinating. So check this out. So only that part of the guitar tone in the entire frequency is being affected. And it's just ever so slightly, just a little dip, as you can see the compressor, bouncing in and out, back and forth, up and down, whatever you want to call it. It's just ever so slightly just touching and kissing that part of my guitar tone. And I think that's super rad. But yeah, that's all I'm doing for the guitars. Just a little EQ and a little multi-band compression. I don't do a lot of compression, like overall compression, because the guitars, high gain guitars, like if you've ever recorded a real amp, not a DI, but like the actual guitar amp sound, like it's just like a wall of sound, right? So like it's already compressed, like there's really no dynamics, so no sense compressing an already compressed thing, right? Like just keep it kind of natural. Basically, long story short, I just turned down my fader to taste at minus 10 dB, and that's just kind of where it's at in the mix. Now, if you hear this like spoon hit, this very Dark Days Parkway Drive intro, I just found this sample somewhere on the internet. I'm doing a decent amount to this hit, but the main thing I'm doing is EQing. This is from, again, the Infinity EQ, and I'm using the preset lo-fi / no lows, and basically just, cutting out all the low end again, because this sound right here, this like high-pitched or high timbre kind of ping sound, is really supposed to be in the upper register and kind of make it like stand out almost like in the background of the song. It's like it's almost like a part of the drums in a way. So like you don't need low end on this sound. Like it's all about the higher timbre, which is a nice little segue we'll get to. I did a little spreader, just a stereo spread, just to kind of make it more epic sounding. Just really spread out the frequency, the actual sound, kind of make it like all over the track, you know what I mean? And last but not least, one of my favorite plugins from Slate Digital is Fresh Air. This is a EQ of sorts, but it only boosts the upper mid range, like the high mids and the highs. And this is really cool. I'll show you what this does. So you hear without it, like it just sounds like a normal like hit, right? Like a normal sample of some metallic impact, right? But when you add the Fresh Air EQ, it gives it that high-end sparkle at the top. It almost like, this is kind of silly, but it sounds like pixie dust or something, like fairy dust. Like I know it sounds silly, but like that's how I hear it. This metallic sparkle kind of thing that's in there, along with the actual impact as well. So, adding a ton, I've got this thing cranked to 100% in the high mids and a decent amount in the high. So it's boosting those frequencies a ton. And I love that. I love this. I use this a lot when I'm mastering as well, or like when I really just have an overall dull sound, whether it's a mix or a guitar. This like high-end boost Fresh Air plugin from Slate Digital, so rad. But let's get to the brains, if you will, the main bread and butter of my mix, and that is my master fader, my stereo out, whatever you want to call it. This is a pretty busy master fader stereo out. We got 4 plugins. I usually try to keep it to like 3 sometimes. Sometimes it gets a little bit crazy, like with 5, but 4 right here for the sake of this mix, for this project, this is what I use, okay? First and foremost, virtual tape machine. I love virtual tape machines. I've been using them for years. Slate Digital has an awesome tape machine with different speeds and different tape types and different machine types, etc. It gives it that old school flair, that old school warmth. So I'll bypass it and I'll let you guys hear it. Like, it just sounds like very flat without it. And that's fine because this is a digital audio workstation. There is no vibe. There is no analog organic feel and or flavor. So this just kind of just gives like that warmth and a big significant boost of like just, I wouldn't say low end, just like oomph. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, whoa, it hits harder. It sounds better, for lack of a better description. You know what I mean? So I love tape machines. Sometimes I'll put them on guitars and like, crank them. But for right now, I'll just, like when I say crank the drive on the tape, give it that real kind of warm sound, that old school sound, tape machine sound. But yeah, that's on the Master Fader, just a little subtle effect. You don't notice if it's not there, but when it is there, it sounds pretty rad, right? Up next, our tried and true Infinity EQ. I think that rhymed. Basically just cutting out all the low end of my track. One final safety net, but if you look here, check out the graph. If you notice, it's really not even, it's like barely affecting anything. You know what I mean? Ever so slightly. I mean, this band is at 20 hertz. So like pretty much inaudible levels of gain and or noise and frequencies that the human ear can't really hear. But the more you add those up in a track, in a mix, whatever, the more mud it just creates. Up next, we have Virtual Mix Rack. Virtual Mix Rack, I use a ton. I've been using it maybe since 2018 when I first found Slate Digital, when I first really kind of started to dive into mixing. Virtual Mix Rack is awesome, man. Like, it has so many different modules of a bunch of different preamps and EQs and compressors and mic tube stuff, a bunch of cool stuff, man. Anyway, what I have right here is two modules, two instances, I guess. What's cool is you can also like reorder these as well. For right now, this is all I have. First one is a virtual mix bus. This is basically just a color flavorer, kind of like a tape machine in the same sense, where like different boards back in the day, when our parents were making records, different boards had different vibes and feels, and the board itself, the mixing board, almost became an instrument in itself. Like, the board had a sound and had a vibe to it. Now that we're in the digital world, there is no vibe, there is no board anymore. They all kind of sound the same, just very flat, neutral sounding, and no vibe, no characteristic. Anyway, this module creates color and kind of emulates that sound of a board. So it's like when you summon all of your tracks into a board, it creates a vibe. Now I'm summoning all my tracks into this board in Slate Digital, and it just creates a little vibe. So off and on. Like I said, again, man, just another color thing. It's like 1 or 2% extra. But when you add those 1 or 2% extra over, 20 different plugins, whatever, like, it adds up and it sounds pretty good. This one right here, this is an EQ that I found in Slate Digital, and it's something that I've never really done ever up until very, very recently, and I really love the results. This is the preset mix bus, Little Silk and Bottom. Obviously, this is my mix bus, so that's what first got me interested in it. I was like, oh, what's this? Basically, you have the ability to create a high shelf and a low shelf. This is boosting a decent amount of low end, kind of in the right register. I'm not even exactly sure what frequency it is, but I kind of like the way it sounds. And at the end of the day, I like using my ears more than my eyes. So off and on with this. So it's doing both. It's boosting the lows and the highs as well. And last but not least, we are using the virtual bus compressor FG Gray. Now, this is just an amazing compressor. Basically, the last thing in my chain, compressing the signal, but I'm not trying to do anything drastic or anything crazy. Just want to catch any sort of peaks and just glue the mix, as people always say. It's kind of a cliche buzzword. Oh, glue it together. So I like to have very subtle, very minimalistic amount of gain reduction when compressing at the very end. I don't like to have, like, here's the meter right here. Some people will go as far as like 8 dBs of gain reduction. I like to keep it at like 1 or 2. Just in the sense of, like, I don't want to squash my mix, you know what I mean? I want to keep it kind of, I don't want to say normal, but maybe natural sounding, you know what I mean? My settings are pretty slow attack, almost like a very slow attack, actually. An auto release, if you have an auto release function, I highly recommend that on your compressor. If you don't, just go fast, just as fast as possible. That's what I used to do up until, recently when I got this one. Now I just use the auto function and it's great. Ratio 4:1, it's just kind of what I've been, comfortable with using. 2:1 or 4:1 is kind of what I use. And that's pretty much what I use to compress. I'll bypass all of my mix bus stuff. I won't bypass like the guitars and stuff. That'll take forever. But I'll bring them back one at a time and I'll just loop this. So this is completely dry, we'll say, completely stale. It sounds good. It sounds like my mix, but it's missing that intensity and that vibe, for better or for worse. I think for better. I'm an artist, but if you don't like it, that's okay, but I like it. And regardless, it's missing that vibe, that feel that I just spent all that time creating, right? So I'm going to, one at a time, put them back in. See? One at a time, they come to life, and each in succession, like stacked on top of each other, exponentially helps the mix, I think. Like, I think the tape machine and the mix like everything other than the safety blanket doesn't really do too much, but like as you add virtual mix rack, as you add the tape machine, as you add the compressor, it just like comes to life ever so slowly but surely, and I think that's super rad. So everybody, that's kind of it for this video. That's just a nice little walkthrough of my process on how I mix my music, man. I love Slate Digital products. They're so rad. I really love the Amp Sim and the Amp Sim suite. Really fun stuff and a lot of cool stuff to check out, all right? So a huge shout out to Slate Digital for sponsoring this video. Thank you so much. I hope we can work together in the future. And thank you to you, yes, you watching at home. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to come hang out with me, okay? All right, everybody, I'm going to get out of here. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay metal. See you guys next time. Later.